This event is looking more like a genocide than an outbreak. The numbers keep going up. Leading professors are estimating new cases at around 50,000 per day. Numerous countries now are reporting third generation spreading, meaning they're not even remotely connected to the import cases that are on file, that are confirmed by the New World Order beast system media. You saw the virus ship dock on the Jersey Shore today, and they just waved everybody on in. I mean, other ships are testing mega positive with, 60 some cases in one ship off of Japan. That's more cases than any other country just on one ship, ladies and gentlemen. And this cruise ship more than likely is the same thing. And they just unloaded everybody off to the East Coast, Jersey Shore. They're going to New York, they're going to Boston, they're going everywhere. DC, you name it. They're going to see the world, ladies and gentlemen. And again, the footage that we're getting from over there is something else. They're sealing off buildings now. It's like a Hollywood movie. And they're now starting the third week of lockdown, 2 full weeks of lockdown. But it's way out of Wuhan. I mean, other countries are melting down. Other cities are turning into nuclear reactors that are basically just, fuming this virus clouds everywhere. People dropping dead with sudden death syndrome. This virus attacks through the lungs, through the eyes. Very important information there. There's a reason they're wearing all of these goggles. Numerous reports now confirm this will kind of give you like a pink eye. You remember pink eye? Of course you do. It'll give you like a pink eye, and then all of a sudden, boom, it attacks everything. The heart, the lungs, the kidneys. This is a weapon. And the leading scientists are now seeing the fingerprints of the weaponization of this coronavirus. And there's been numerous reports of coronaviruses leaking from these very same labs. Same virus, same labs. And in the previous releases, they got lucky. But in this release, they didn't get lucky. Or is it part of the plan? It just seems like we've seen this before. The plane is 20 miles out. The plane is 10 miles out. Do the orders still stand? Of course they still stand. And this virus is going to hit. And what makes this virus so, dastardly, if you will, is that nobody knows what happened until it's too late. It blows up like an atomic bomb in a city. Everybody's infected. And it's too late. Again, there's numerous countries right now already reporting third generation spreading. No links whatsoever to the known import cases. And it's just showing up everywhere. You got Singapore, Malaysia, you got Hong Kong, you got Japan. And they're all like crossing that same threshold that China was at not so long ago. And at the beginning of January, it was like 40 cases. And the beginning of February, it's like, who knows how many cases. They're saying 30 now, 30,000 on the news, but it was reported 100,000, on the first day of the lockdown by people on the inside, working in the hospitals. And, we've heard just like case after case. And now it's gotten to the point where they're just like welding doors shut and throwing everybody into literally a death camp. And not like, a death camp where there's a gas chamber, because these people have already been infected. It's not Zyklon B, it's Zyklon C coronavirus, bitches. And of course, everybody should have, mixed feelings as far as what's going on here, because this does look like some kind of orchestrated event, but this is gonna basically take out most of the people, or many people we should say, in the big cities. How bad is the kill zone? We don't know for sure. But reports right now are, reflecting a much higher kill rate than 2%. Much, much higher. And, MERS was around 30%. SARS was around 20%. Some villages are reporting 80%. So we don't know. But, I mean, people are dropping dead, ladies and gentlemen. It's like, they've been gassed, except they've been, infected with a virus. And again, no doubt that this has escaped the lab. And the question is, what are they doing, right now at the White House? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're preparing to go underground. They know it's too late. They can't believe it themselves. Some of them have probably cried themselves to sleep, knowing what they know, knowing that they're going to the underground bunkers while everybody basically gets, many people get killed off. They say they have the situation contained. They're welding doors shut of apartment buildings. Numerous videos of that, and they're just dragging people that look, okay, to basically gymnasiums to get infected and die. And so it's a different kind of gas chamber. And, of course, when they come, by to your location, they say that you're infected. Nobody's going to help you. Nobody's going to give you CPR. You know what I mean? That's all they got to say. They don't have to say you're a Russian anymore. They can just say you're infected, and they'll take you away. Truthers should be especially concerned, as far as what may happen in the cover of these operations. And we want to dedicate some time to questions and answers. If you guys have questions that you want us to address, leave them in the comments, not just in the chat, because they just go by so quickly. And we'll just pick them up. Of course, we're broadcasting live, hacking the matrix on the ScrewTube here. We've been banned so many times, it's just normal to start again. But you're seeing this for yourself there. You got the crematoriums. They're welding, buildings shut. I mean, we got numerous videos of this. We haven't compiled everything, but we've got numerous examples of this. This has become like the new policy, new standard operating procedure. You're seeing the gymnasium here in the middle. Many of these makeshift hospitals have gone up. They've just, put people in this room so that they can infect each other. And so, no escape. You're there. It's like the gas chamber, except, so much better. Because on the surface, it looks like, everything's okay, doesn't it? And if you just watch the news, you'd think everything is okay. Does this look okay? We got countless videos like this. And of course, they've been rounding up the citizen journalists out there in China that are filming this. You heard the story about the doctor, the whistleblower. They basically reprimanded him. He got infected, and, well, you heard the story. So undoubtedly they would have caught his case early. I'm sure, there's been an investigation. Look at that nice little box in the right screen there. Just ready for the incinerator. They figured that, that part out. It's become a process. It's become, industrialized. And it's flying under the cover of an outbreak, ladies and gentlemen. And that way people really won't ask any questions. They won't ask too many questions. But scientists are starting to ask the questions like, where did this virus escape from? Was it some kind of vaccine that mutated? Experimental vaccine? That's certainly what they'll have you believe. But this thing had a gain of function, lots of functions. And they're seeing the fingerprints of copy and paste, CRISPR style, but with a process that's described a little differently. And we've put that in the description if you want to research that. Also links on our website, stfnreport.com. You've seen this storyline before, Who Benefits, V for Vendetta. That was a pretty deep movie that spawned, quite a bit of stuff. I think there'll be a lot of movies, based on what's happening right now. We're living in a movie right now, and it's unfolding at the speed of life. Most movies are condensed into about 2 hours. Like Contagion, it's how many days, in 2 hours. And so, this is playing out in real time, but we're seeing it totally break down. And we're seeing like no attempt to really stop this spread and the like. So people should really be thinking about what they can do to protect themselves. The government ain't going to help you. So you need to figure out what you can do to protect yourself now. Go get a painter suit, a mask, N95, if not N99. You want goggles. We're getting reports that this infects like pink eye, airborne pink eye, and then it infects your entire body. So you got to get the goggles. You got to get the masks. And the like. If you got air filtration systems, change those filters, get some extra filters and the like, and and start, from the ground up. Rethink all of your security and all of that stuff. Load up on the ammo and the like it's the end of the world, because you don't know how far this is going to go. The Fed today announced we should expect a big hit in the U.S. economy. The golden days are about to evaporate. Just like that. I mean, just like that, man. Everybody was celebrating. Even still today, I'm sure on CNBC, they're celebrating, new IPOs and the like. But, they're just kind of briefly talking about it, but they're not showing you any of these videos. They're not, they're not trying to be too helpful. And it's a general cause for concern, because you'd think everybody would be playing these videos going, what is going on over there? All you really get is like, we think they're underestimating the numbers. Oh, you don't say. You think they're underestimating the numbers. That's like an understatement, ladies and gentlemen. Leave your questions in the comments, not the chat. We'll address them in the last 5 minutes if you have questions. Again, we covered the numerous videos of the sudden death syndrome. People just basically keel over of a heart attack, and this is coming out in the scientific literature that it infects the heart muscle as well as the lungs. And given that there aren't really nerve receptors in the heart, well, not like the sensory nerve type, they don't really feel that infection, but they're seeing it in the autopsies. And so this is starting to come out. It infects like Ebola, in a sense. And thinking of the Ebola case, we've passed a new milestone. Ebola had about 25,000 cases over 2 years. You remember that, the new strain in West Africa, that was suspected to have come out of a lab as well. It infected at much higher rates and just sustained and lasted forever. But that only infected 25,000 people. We're already like way, way, way beyond that. This virus is spreading at warp speed because it's a weapon. And that's what people don't get. I mean, they think like, chances are this will be like the cold. You're going to experience a Chinese weapon in your hometown, and it got there at warp speed and nobody can stop it. Right? And it seems like the best advice that the television can give you is basically ignore what's going on. Don't pay attention to, these videos. Don't pay attention to, what the news is doing or what the alternative news or independent news is doing. Focus instead on, our hypnotic messages. And it's so creepy to see like, all of the social media platforms like on board. Like you can see right away as soon as you start searching for this stuff, like on Twitter or whatever, they're like, here, come get the official version, way up on top. It's there, like boom, and it's to the point where, we saw a Bloomberg article talking about the arrests of journalists in China, tried to share it on the Twitter. Not happening. And we even tried to copy and paste the link, not just using the button. Not happening. So, they're feeling the pressure. Everybody's feeling the pressure right now. I mean, China does not want people talking about this, and they're coming on saying, everything's under control, basically. Like, we have the means to cure and control this virus. And look, they're doing what nobody else will ever be able to do as far as trying to contain this virus. And you have to, applaud them on the efforts that they're undertaking right now to a certain extent. I mean, it's like way beyond anything anybody would ever dream of, probably, right? Sending people to the virus camps, et cetera, fusing the doors shut. But in any case, I mean, this thing has just exploded. And, there's just so much to cover. We really want to go through all of the recent news, everything that we know so far. I know we were going to go somewhere with that last kind of tangent there, but it's not easy just thinking about all of this, what's coming. And you just got to step back and remember, I mean, this is going to hit the big cities. This is going to hit the Sodom and Gomorrah. The timing here is pretty impeccable from our point of view. And, it just seems like this is really going to be major and extraordinary. And I can't tell you all the reasons why I say that. Not because I don't want to, but I think, for the time being, people just really would focus on that instead of anything else. But it literally is the pages of the Bible playing out before our very eyes right now. Biblical plagues, locusts like never seen before, the earthquakes, the fires. I mean, it's looking a lot like hell on earth. I mean, even the politicians, are looking pretty demonic, as is the television. And, there's no way of ignoring this angle either. That this, is biblical in proportion, and it's just going to wipe out, who knows how many people that are not of faith. And, there's a lot you can say about that. And, I think that the story is so much more complex than we probably have time for right now. But, it's huge. This event is huge. It's historical. It's already historical. It's already like unprecedented. And it's a weapon that somehow escaped the lab. Did it, was it on purpose? Was it an accident? If you start searching, you'll find that the Wuhan lab has already had events of coronavirus escaping, and other labs in China. They've had this unfortunate record. But, in this day and age, that doesn't mean that that's what happened. And it could just be that eventually that's what it'll look like happened. But you never know. But it's here now, and at least we know something about it. In the beginning days, we really didn't know much about what this virus was, and it's really interesting to keep looking at the various articles that come out about the first days of this outbreak, because the more we know about what's happening here, the better it is. I mean, you can go out and tune into the sports channel now if you want to. Enjoy it while you can. But I think the more we know here, the better it is. And what we're piecing together is that this outbreak follows a type of strategy that we could probably refer to as a syndrome. And, the first 30 days of the ramp up period, it's like in stealth mode. And it's creeping through, burning through people at rates, you can't even imagine. Sometimes, the turnaround is 2 or 3 days from infection to, a person being a super spreader. And that means that the cycles, are, rather quick and short, and it ramps up, in a couple weeks to the point where like everybody in the city is infected. And, we're not going to dwell on that. We're thinking about ways to explain, everything that we're trying to process and digest and and the like. It's not easy at this stage trying to sift through all of the information. We've got a ton of talking points, believe it or not. And this cruise ship, I think, is a big case. It's starting to get lost in the noise, and that's the problem with like crises and huge developing stories like this, is that a lot of things get lost in the noise. It gets lost in the numbers. It's hard to put things into perspective. But this cruise ship here that just landed on Jersey Shore is like a nightmare, because you had at least four people directly from China at the height of the epidemic on this cruise ship. They're being carted off. It's not just walked off. I mean, they're being carted off, and nobody's got protective gear. And if this is anything like the other cruise ship that's got 60 people infected, there's probably as many people infected there, and they were all just released into the wild, into the urban jungle. And it's like they did this on purpose, and you can bet that this story will fade away. They don't want people talking about this virus ship that's just docked on Jersey Shore, right? It's like a ghost ship, but they did this on purpose. And there's no telling how many, mini incubators, there are out there that they're kind of like ramping up on purpose right now. Kind of like, a Hadron Collider. It goes through a couple different, on-ramps before it gets into the big loop. You know what I mean? And if you're going to incubate a mass epidemic, you're going to need some generators the size of a cruise ship, showing up. Ghost ships showing up out there, just depositing seeds into the city just to make sure that this thing goes. And as soon as it begins, it's like lighting a piece of paper on fire. It's just not going to stop. It's just going to burn through everything. Nobody's got any type of immunity or full immunity to this virus. They're at least going to be, part of the botnet. And it's just going to spread in ways that we can't even imagine. But in a sense, we can imagine, because we can look at what's happening in Asia right now. In 2 months, they went from basically, 0 cases to full shutdown, mass incinerators, virus camps, and untold numbers of body bags. Look at this ghost ship. It just shows up on Jersey Shore, and they want to talk about something else. The virus ship. I mean, this was spooky, man. And just hearing about it, just lurching out of the fog at 6 a.m. with, a ton of coronavirus. It's like, this is a nightmare. Is it Halloween? And the year's just begun. You can't imagine, how this is going to end up. I mean, this year's already starting off, pretty bad. I think people would have to say. I mean, there's been a lot of bad news. And, I mean, the good news was the acquittal, right? I mean, there was a trial, no witnesses, and they're running around like, I did it. It makes me think of the Teflon Don stories. But, look... Nobody's really complaining that bad. I mean, it could be worse. There could be some Hillary out there. Where's that girl again? And whatever happened to Epstein? See how the Epstein case just disappeared, right? And they've been applying pressure ever since that thing, surfaced. I don't think this is the time for Epstein, but, it's all connected. Just like, these eugenics programs. You got the death towers, you got the fluoride. I mean, who fluoridates their water now? It's got the big poison label on it. Oh, everybody's fluoridating their water now. Every city, that is. Everybody's got an autistic kid these days, or a kid that's transitioning, mutating into something, unhuman. It's like the zombie apocalypse. It just keeps getting worse. Have you seen the skies, the geoengineering? All this stuff is related. Evil is as evil does. And these people are demons, ladies and gentlemen. The ones that are running, this secular world. And we've been talking about that regularly in our broadcast. Be sure to check out the video archives. If you're just joining us, shocking footage is showing buildings being basically welded shut, and people are locked in. I mean, you've probably seen the videos where they're locking, apartments or whatever. That was like, the first couple days. Now they're locking entire buildings. And this is something that we talked about as well, is that, just locking people in a building isn't necessarily going to make things better, especially if there's like shared ventilation, people going in and out every once in a while for groceries or whatever. And then there was like some major super spreader events. There was like rumors over there where they were saying, oh, there's some magic medicine at the traditional medicine shop, some special herbs and spices and whatever, and everybody did the mad dash like midway through the quarantine to reinfect themselves again. And once you're locked in a room with somebody that's infected, they're getting infected. And that's been proven time and time again. I mean, this virus is highly contagious. It's airborne, and it even works like airborne pink eye. And they knew this early on. I mean, we should really be paying attention to what the Chinese are doing here, because they know this virus better than we do. They know this virus better than anybody else. And if they're fusing the doors shut, if they're, throwing everybody into a death camp, we may want to ask the question, why? How bad is it that they got to throw people in the death camps, that they got these mass incinerators, that they're fusing the doors shut, blocking off all the roads, right? Arresting journalists. How bad is it over there? Really? And it doesn't look good. And the problem here, the big problem here, is that nobody knows how bad it is, really. And, given the circumstances here, I think it's pretty safe to assume that this is much worse than we can possibly imagine. And again, the scientists are now saying that this definitely escaped the lab. And whether it was released on purpose, that's another story. We have a very strong feeling that both sides of the Pacific, had agreed to this during the first phase of the last trade agreement. Don't ask us how we got our intel there, but that seems to be our position on the matter. But there's really no telling exactly, what the details are, and assertions like that certainly can't be used to convict. But if we had to bet, given the attitude right now, they're just releasing the ghost ship. They're not doing anything to, really stop this outbreak. And with all of the, AI and the like that we have, they would have been able to, this would have shown up on the radar, way back, sometime in November. There's no way that this thing just kind of did what it did without us knowing what was going on. And so, look, for the time being, it's better to presume that this is also going to be an inside job, to put it, just real bluntly. But they're going to facilitate and augment this outbreak as much as they can. They're not going to try and stop it. And the way this virus is designed, it's basically meant to, reach its, what's the word to describe it? Pre-epidemic capacity in a stealth kind of way, and then just explode. And there's just no stopping it. I mean, this literally is like a bomb, but, without the flash. And when this thing goes off, I mean, many people will be killed. And so, look, there's probably like more, deadly kind of viruses that they could have released. But this virus gives them plausible deniability. I mean, even today, they're still out there going, oh, now it came from an anteater. But what scientists, microbiologists are picking up in the genome sequencing is that this is an engineered strain. And I think, the more you research it, the more that makes sense. And I think most people by now have a pretty, strong feeling as far as, where this virus came from. The question now is really, how do you connect the dots? But it's the same kind of, song and dance that we've been seeing over the years. The death towers, the vaccines, the fluoride, the pesticides, and the like. And, early on in this administration, we started seeing quite a few Gladio B ops that entailed chemical weapons releases in Syria, numerous attacks in Syria. And we found out that the OPCW reports were, trafficked, right? And, they shot cruise missiles into there, and, they invaded Syria and had troops in there. And you saw what happened to the Kurds. Remember that genocide? But, when you look at the Gladio B chemical attacks in Syria, and you also look at the Port and Down attacks, or the the Russians did it chemical attack, Novichok. Remember the Novichok, right? Well, that happened in the backyard of the Port and Down weapons facility. Their premier, chemical weapons facility. And it's kind of like this Wuhan virus, just happened, right outside their bioweapons facility. So, when you start looking at that in the noise and you start connecting the dots, what these people have been doing. It's right there on the Georgia Guidestones. Why would this be any different? And if you really had to, look at things in terms of probability, I mean, they're the usual suspects. The bigger question is what can be done. These people aren't going to help you. These people on the television, nothing that they're going to roll out is going to, promote the American way. It's more of the same, New World Order BS. Whatever's coming, martial law, full lockdown, you name it. It's going to be their agenda continues, and it's not going to be, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think everybody should be concerned here and start, being a skeptic when it comes to what this television and what any politician is telling you, whether you like them or not. We guarantee you they're not on your side, whether it's Republican or Democrat, whether it's NBC or Fox News, they're not on your side. The whole thing is gamed. The whole thing is rigged. It's part of the control system of this matrix. They know you're either going to be a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't take much for the devil to fool the sheeple out there. You know what I mean? But if you pay attention to what they're doing, they're splitting up, the issues between them, and it's just like a duopoly. And, how can you be pro-life and not pro-environment, for example? Speaking of which, we heard it was 65 degrees in Antarctica, the South Pole, today. Warmer than many places on Earth in the Northern Hemisphere. So that was newsworthy. I mean, there's all sorts of other news that we could be covering, but we're going to continue to focus on, this mega outbreak, of course. This really is more of an informal discussion. Again, this virus is like nothing anybody has ever seen. And people are contagious before they show symptoms, before they even know. And that means that you're never going to get any type of warning when it's circulating in your town. And that's the worst part, is it could pretty much be there almost right now. And we've been looking at the forecasts, we've been looking at the models and the like, and, given how many people, flew in, and how many, secondary, tertiary contacts there must be, and even brief exposure turns you into, a virus generator, basically. It's just there's no telling exactly how far. Our best models right now, which are really kind of focusing on, cities that have had import cases, you're probably already looking at, thousands of cases already in the city, and the spread could already be in the next mid-sized town over, starting. The first embers or seeds are blowing into the next little satellite city from these metropolises. So that's pretty much at the stage that we're seeing, but it's going to start in the big cities. It's going to be a generator, it's going to incubate, and then it's going to start spreading and spinning off. Let's see if we got any questions in the audience. Anybody out there? Much love to everybody out there. And the comments, where are the comments? Well, we'll try and get there, ladies and gentlemen. This is epic, and we're going to see tomorrow, it's going to be another, kind of a set of numbers. But we'll see if we can get the comments. It's funny because now usually we can see the comments as well as the chat, but now there's just no comments, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have to come back to the questions, but there's a lot of angles of the story that we're looking at. The Singapore thing, the Japan thing is, are emerging outbreaks right now. Tertiary spreading, third generation spreading, happening right now in those countries. We've also got, real interesting cases in Germany and France. And Paris had, numerous direct flights every day from Wuhan. So we're expecting Paris to be a huge epicenter, San Francisco, LA. And, it's probably going to hit and sprinkle every big city that you've ever heard of. And it's all going to bloom at around the same time. We'll probably see kind of, waves of infection, in terms of like cities, but we can expect every major city to be hit. And our best timelines here, just being real conservative average in terms of, R naught being at say 2 and, given, so many seeds per city and the like. We're kind of expecting not to see an outbreak, major outbreaks, end of the world, in America, people, fighting over toilet paper and for another, say, 2 to 3 weeks. But if things turn unfavorable, like a higher, R naught, which is like how infectious is it? If it infects more than 2 people per case on average, then, we could be looking at slightly shorter time frames. And I think in the worst case scenario, we could start seeing, major outbreaks in Western cities as early as the beginning of next week. But undoubtedly that process has already begun. We'll have to see, this is a developing story. We'll have to address the questions for the next show. I'll look at the comments if you guys have topics or angles that you want us to cover, because right now it's just kind of like, having all of this settle in and process. But we've got our suspects list. And I think what's important to understand here is that there's a huge contrast between what the television is portraying this to be versus what's actually happening on the ground. And in the news, it's like things are under control, everything's okay. And what you're seeing from citizen journalists is basically virus camps, people being forcibly taken away. They're like welding doors shut. They've shut everything down. Body bags, you got the incinerators, it's like a horror movie. It's like Resident Evil. So, there's 2 versions of the story. The truth is undoubtedly somewhere in between. It may not be as bad as we're suspecting, but nobody's ever seen anything as bad as this in living color. As long as there's been, color, nobody's seen anything that's ramping up like this. And again, this is just the beginning. This is nothing compared to what the final numbers will be, on the very last, page of the story. But remember, in all of these horror movies that you see, that talk about, virus, the T virus or the X virus or whatever, they're condensing, months of timeline into 2 hours. you know, where a day can just be a couple seconds and the like. You know, we're living this out in real time, so it's going to take, you know, a while. It's going to take a while. When you know, look at movies like 28 Weeks Later, you know, that's basically like 7 months, right? So it doesn't happen overnight, and the like. But the one thing that everybody pretty much agrees upon now is that, you know, a Fukushima just happened. Something escaped the lab. It's seeded every major city, and that means when people are going to get sick with this thing, this is like a military weapon, a Chinese military weapon, you know, essentially that's infecting everybody. At least that's what, you know, it's supposed to look like. We've been looking at the strains, and, you know, there's some real peculiar oddities there, especially like the first or one of the California strains that looks way off the charts in terms of its genome mutations. It's like that one got released a little early, or something happened there. It looks like a Building 7 on the BBC kind of thing in terms of genomics. But in any case, you know, this is a developing story, and there's a lot to talk about. If you're joining us late, you know, replay on demand. Check out our previous videos. We've talked a lot about, you know, how infectious this is, various incubation periods. And that reminds us of, like, you know, case after case. We're going to talk about Singapore. We want to talk about the Brighton case in the UK that came from Singapore. And, you know, but basically we're seeing a lot of cross infections. We're seeing a lot of, you know, evidence that this thing is much, much more advanced in the neighboring countries than we think it is. That, you know, these countries are about to go full-blown China syndrome, you know, just in time for the Olympics, remember? And then, you know, we're also, you know, seeing, you know, quite a bit of evidence that we're lagging, but not far behind those countries. Because in theory, you know, if these neighboring countries, especially like Japan, which is an island, is now melting down like China, which it is, and if Malaysia, which is an island country, you know, if that's melting down, you know, those people got there by plane. And if those countries are melting down, chances are that, you know, our country is going to melt down. Now, the slight difference is that, you know, flights from China to Japan are probably like 3 or 4 hours versus flights from China to America are like 10, 12 hours. So statistically speaking, there's probably, like, you know, only 20% of the traffic. So that's going to play on the initial startup. But with ghost ships coming in, you know, it could be as bad as China. Well, it could be as bad as Japan and South Korea, we should say, in America. Let's start that again. This is live television, all right? But it could be as bad in America as it is in Japan and South Korea and Malaysia right now, in theory. So they've got all of the evidence that it's melting down. And the problem, you know, the feeling that we get here is that they're not doing a lot of screening, you know, in the cities to see what's actually floating around out there. And they really should be doing more. We'll have to leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance. Oh yeah, well, the video guy is on vacation. Can we ring that guy? Okay, we're going to terminate this broadcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Check out the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Till the next time, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.